Morning, we are on Ches Amud Beis 48b. About in the middle of the page, if you go to where the widest set of lines are and you count down 3 or so lines towards the end of the line, there's a colon, and then it says Mishacharev, and then there's the Beis Hey Mem Kuf, and that stands for Beis HaMikdash. If you're looking at the screen right there.
Hard to know what these abbreviations are.
Yeah.
Four lines down on the right side of the water set of lines.
Yeah.
And then the
Ches Beis. Make sure you're looking at the Sotah. It's the third Masechta in the book. So the Mishnah was on the list of changes that happened throughout history, considering spiritual decline or decline of divine revelation, and the things that changed as a result. So we've been going through a number of these things. The last thing we discussed was like prophecy and divine communication. Now the Mishnah addresses another such divine interventive measure, miraculous sort of thing, phenomenon. And that is the SHAMIR. SHAMIR is a miraculous sort of creature that, at least the way it was depicted to me as a child, looked something like a worm. It was clearly something that's elongated, as we'll see just from the descriptions. We'll see it's definitely elongated. It was definitely sensitive, but it had this capacity to cut through stone. And this miraculously is what helped King Solomon build a temple, as we shall presently learn. So the Gemara says, Mishachar Beis HaMikdash, from when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the temple was destroyed, Batal HaShamir, this Shamir ceased to exist.
which word is ceased?
Shamir. Oh, the word batal is ceased. Batal means like nullified, ceased.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no longer. And the Shamir is this creature. It's just interesting because there's all kinds of discussion amongst archaeologists about how the ancients were able to do all this kinds of fascinating building. I mean, not just King Solomon's temple, but the ancient Egyptians and the Mesopotamians and all the other across the world. Yeah, the pyramids, and even in South America, you have such old, actually, ironically, pyramid-shaped type stuff that are also built in manners that are just beyond our understanding, even by today's technology. So maybe the Shamir was part of that process. I don't know. I don't know that the Shamir is exclusively for exclusively for only the temple. In fact, I can make the case not that way, in the sense that, right, we have the famous statement, which is that God said the world is not worthy of gold, but God decided to create gold for the temple. But as with all things of free choice, so gold is available for everybody. Why was it created? For the temple. In other words, there are things that exist in our world whose purpose, well, not just things, everything that exists in our world, its purpose is for the service of Hashem. And I could create it exclusively for the service of Hashem that would kind of render free choice moot. So these things are available across the board, right? The same thing is true of prophecy, for that matter. Bilam was also a prophet, right? There's mystical experience and spiritual experience. It's outside of Torah. And there's the free choice from Klippa or from Hashem, from God, from Torah or not. So I can make the case that Shamir existed across the board. And especially as we're going to learn soon, like one of the other things that the Gemara mentioned was like the sweetness of honey stopped when the temple was destroyed. That sweetness of honey was available to anybody in the world. It just stopped when the temple was destroyed. That divine influx into reality ceased. So perhaps Shamir was available across the board, and that's how the ancient Egyptians built whatever they built. I don't know. Just a fun theory to play with. At any rate, I don't know, Bonan, so our sages taught. Shamir, this creature, Shabana ba, Shaboy bana shlemas beis hamikdash, through which King Solomon built the Beis Hamikdash. Shenemar, as the verse reads, there's verses in the book of Malachim, book of Kings, quite a length actually, quite a few chapters, discuss the building of King Solomon of Shlomo Melech, both of the temple and of his private residence. Great details described. So one verse reads like this: "Ba'bayis in the house, b'banoisoi, when it was built, even shlema, complete stones, masa and nivna, that were brought from the quarry they were built." So complete stone taken from the quarry, indicating that directly removed in whole from the quarry and then brought to the temple, as opposed to chiseled and hammered and molded and so on. So how did they do that? Well, the Shamir did that. Shamir cuts this large stone out of the quarry and then brought as is to the temple without their need for them to chisel and hammer at it. And comments this Mishnaic text, Hadvarim Kiksavam, the matters should be taken as they're written. That's it. Taken right out of the quarry, no other work necessary, directly put into the building. Divri Rabbi Yehuda, these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Nechemia responds to Rabbi Yehuda. Can we conclude that that's the case? Does it not also read, Kol Ela, quote, all these? It's in the same chapters in the book of Kings. Kol Ela Avad Mekares, all of these are precious stones, that were sawed off with a saw, indicating that they did use chisel and hammer or something. So therefore, Rabbi Nechemia says we cannot conclude that it means literally they took a full stone without doing any work. Okay, they took stones from the quarry, but they did work with it too, as the Torah describes, using a stone. Yeah. So in Cain, if so, what is the meaning of the verse which reads that you did not hear the sound of a hammer and chisel as they built the building, or you did not hear from the house as it was being built? Another verse there describing that no chisel and hammer is used is kind of conflicting. So it says the Gemara, they would fix it outside and bring it in. So this is Rabbi Yehuda's view, is no work to be done on the stones at all. Shamir cuts it, full stone directly from the quarry, placed in. Rabbi Nechemia's view, no, they would cut it out, chisel, hammer, and all the rest of it, but they would do that outside the building. And therefore, when the verse says no sound of metal is to be heard from in the house, it means literally from inside the house. But outside, you could have heard it. This is actually the halacha, that they would cut the stone if there are halachas around building the Beis Hamikdash, and one of them is one doesn't bring metal tools into the Beis Hamikdash, you cut them outside. And the basic common reason for that is because metal is, especially with chisel, hammer, and these kinds of tools, are an instrument of destruction. In the temples, actually the terminology is from our sages is that which ends life or shortens life should not be brought into the house that lengthens life. The temple is about lengthening a Jew's life, brings atonement and so on, and the metal, the sword, the hammer shortens life, which is also why King David wasn't allowed to build a Beis Hamikdash, because he fought too many wars. All necessary wars, but nonetheless. Okay, so we have two views. Rabbi Yehuda, Shamir does whole stones and brought to the temple. Rabbi Nechemia, nope, they cut them outside the temple and then brought into the temple. Omar Rabbi, now Rabbi comes along, which means therefore the original Rabbi Yehuda was not Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. Must have been a different Rabbi Yehuda. Right, because Rabbi is Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. Whenever we have the word Rebbe, which is like the Rebbe, is Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. It's the compiler of the Mishnah. So Rebbe now reconciles and says, Niroyan, it seems to me to follow Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, the words of Rabbi Yehuda, that Shamir cut the stones, and they were brought completely from the quarry without any need for hammer, chisel, etc. It would seem to me correct, but Avnei Mikdash, if we're talking about the stones of the temple. Divrei Rabbi Nechemiah, but the words of Rabbi Nechemiah, Ba'avnei Beis in the stones of his house. I mentioned to you these chapters describe the building of both the temple and of his private residence, both being done at the same time, which is in itself a whole discussion. It's disrespectful building that he ended up building the Beis Mikdash bigger than his own house, discussing in his own right. So Rabbi Yehuda therefore says, here's how we reconcile the opinions. When it came to the building of the Beis Mikdash, Shamir, miraculous cutting stone. His own house, chisel and hammer, and then brought in, and then built into his house, which means even in King Shlomo's personal residence, no metal came in there to cut the stone. Because in Nehemiah's description that the stones were cut outside and then brought into the house, Rebbe is applying that to his private residence. Which would mean even in his private residence, there was no chisel or hammer brought in there, which is, what's the word? Exemplifies King Solomon's status as the king of peace. Even his private residence, no metal. He fought no wars, right? Which is why he was the one to build the Beis Mikdash, right? Okay, so now the question becomes, in Rabbi Nechemiah's view, what was the purpose of the Shamir? What did they use it for? Right, in Rabbi Nechemiah's view, so according to Rabbi, they used it for the temple. According to Rabbi Yehuda, they used it for everything. But according to Rabbi Nechemiah, where even the stones of the temple were cut outside and then brought in, so what was the function of the Shamir? This miraculous creature. Rabbi Nechemiah's view, Shamir, this miraculous creature, also, what was its purpose? So, Miboyale, it was needed, explains, or Nechemiah would explain. This is the Gemara analyzing Rabbi Nechemiah's view. And I know this because, I don't know if Rabbi Nechemiah himself not speaking.
It's written in Aramaic.
It's written in Aramaic. If it was Rabbi Nechemiah speaking, considering that he would be from the Mishnaic era, it would be in Hebrew. And I see the Gemara speaking in Aramaic, I know it's the Gemara's analysis. So this is the Gemara saying what Rabbi Nechemiah would have said. Rabbi Nechemiah would tell you that we require the Shamir L'chadatanya for the following idea taught in the Mishnaic text, which reads, Avan Malolum, these stones placed on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. Back to that breastplate, which is again this intertwined divine miraculous intervention. The breastplate itself is divine communication, with the stones lighting up. And now the Gemara comments on how it was made, specifically, actually, how those letters were made. What's the issue? The problem we have to solve is as follows. Avon Malalum, these stones that were on the Kohen's, the high priest's breastplate, right? 12 stones, and then 2 on his shoulders. 12 stones have the 12 tribes, plus the word Shiftei Ka. So, says this Mishnaic text, you cannot write the words out on these stones using ink. Mishum Shenamar, because the verse reads, they should be like a engraved like a signet ring, which means it has to be engraved or embossed, which means you cannot use ink. But they cannot etch it out using ismol, using like a knife or a chisel. Shenemar, as the verse reads, bimoloisam, that the stones have to be complete. And when you chisel them out, you'll lose their completion. You chisel away at some of the stone. So how do you have letters imprinted on a stone if you cannot write with ink and you cannot chisel it out? Ella, rather, what would they do? They would mark the areas using ink. Shamir, and then they would take the shamir and place it on, or show it the track of the letters that you've marked. On the outside of the stone. And then the stones would crack open on its own. But there would be chiseled, so you wouldn't lose any stone. And the Gemara gives two examples to describe how you have something cracked open without losing any of the actual material.
Like a scratch.
Okay, well, scratch also would be to remove, but the Gemara gives two examples. Like a fig, shenifkas, that cracks in the sun. So it splits open. The heat heats it up, it expands, and it cracks. So you don't lose any of the material of the fig, but it's cracked open. So likewise, the stone would pop open without losing any of its material. So you maintain its wholeness, and yet it's still like engraved, and therefore not relying on ink. It is pretty cool, right? Come in. Every day. The eine chasera klum, and it wouldn't be lacking anything. Likewise, how are you? Ukebika zoo, and like a valley. Shenifkas b'ma'asak that cracks in the wintertime. We're familiar with that here in Montreal. The eine chasera klum, and none of the material is lacking. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and I don't fully have my finger on it completely, but I'll tell you the pieces that I'm thinking about. This miraculous creature on its own didn't know where to cut. Well, first of all, let's back up a second. There's two different functions here. One is the stones being cut, or I guess the stones being cut. On the other hand, then there's another function, which is to like make it expand to the point that it cracks open. And maybe that's how it made it cut, not by like chiseling down, but kind of like making it split, I suppose. Right? And part of that function is that you don't want to lose any of the material. Something about that symbolism. There's also something to be said about the fact that, notwithstanding the miraculous nature of this creature, it didn't know on its own where to cause a split. You have to show it. You write it out, and then it follows the pattern that you placed. And then the next item I'm thinking about is the two examples of, and one comes from summer, one comes from heat, and one comes from cold. A fig in the heat, and a valley in the cold. These are the pieces that I'm thinking about. I don't know how to put them all together, but this is where my mind is going. And
The key is
floor is open.
both don't lose any mass.
Right, so there's not losing the mass, but simultaneously also open split.
Well, I mean, in lieu of the
That's correct.
split.
That's right. And when you cut with like a chisel, even if you cut straight down, you lose something,
Of course.
right? As opposed to when something's just cracked open, we don't lose any mass. So I'm my thinking is going in this direction. You know, we have this concept of bittul, right? To set yourself aside and surrender to Hashem. But setting yourself aside and surrendering to Hashem does not mean you lose who you are as a personality. So what? You stop feeling now? You have no sense of self. You have no love. You have no fears. You have no ideas. You do. All the mass is still there, but it's split open. So it's like the matzah made of the same ingredients as chametz, just didn't rise. You have all the same ingredients, you just didn't rise, right? And again, I haven't had this fully formulated, but also I'm thinking like the contrast of like the fig versus the valley. But the fig is a rich, sweet, full fruit, and it too, I guess, in the heat of like being overwhelmed by God's love and embrace, it opens up to receive from Hashem without losing any of its own juice and love and luster and preciousness and beauty. And the valley is in the reverse. It's in the cold where it splits. So he's in fear of Hashem, say. And in his awe of Hashem, he also splits open to be a recipient. but never all the while never losing his mass, doesn't lose his personality, doesn't lose his own contribution just because he's opening up.
Whether out loud, you're out. Saying,
Yeah, but there's like the mistaken version of bittul is to say I'm worthless, I am nothing, I have nothing to contribute,
right.
and therefore I'm surrendered to Hashem. That's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is shamir, is you're still a precious stone, as the breastplate is. It's just opened. It's open to be receiving.
It's harder to understand the desert part because
The valley part,
the
yeah.
valley part, because I mean it happens in real time because of a reduction in moisture.
Right.
You pack a 5-pound bag of flour, it sits on the shelf, it becomes an ounce less because
Right.
water comes from it.
Right.
So this is completely miraculous.
It's describing a natural phenomenon like this, just like the valleys crack when in the winter. That's what it's describing here, like a natural phenomenon. Right? That's what it seems to be trying to do. I'm suggesting also that when you can be locked in yourself in love of Hashem, you can also be locked in yourself in fear of Hashem, like trapped in that version of yourself. So it's not that you want to lose that version of yourself, but just open it up to be a recipient, and then be locked in it, whichever version it is, whether it's a fig or it's a valley, whether it's in the summer or the winter. Open up, whatever stone it is, open up. And there's something about marking also, where like it can't be, yeah. You have to mark where the split is. In other words, the opening up can't be imposed on you. You have to like take the initiation as to.
It's not like guided.
It's guided. It's right. It's not like you're.
It's directed. Like
it's correct. Directional. That's right. It's directional.
It's directional.
Yeah.
But the same theme.
Yeah.
That we have with the music.
Yeah, where it's directional as opposed to just opening up to whatever is there.
Right.
No, you're open up specifically for Hashem in a directional manner. Yeah, good point.
Non-directional bittul.
That's right. It's not undirectional bittul. We're just self-negation. I'm a nothing. I'm a nobody, and just trample on me. No, it's very directed. It's precise. I'm opening to Hashem without losing anything of who I am.
It's interesting using the worm as sort of an instrument. Worm.
That has been presented to me as a child, but I don't see the word worm here.
Oh, okay.
Just saying. But you'll see the description in a moment why it might be sound accurate. And maybe it's elsewhere we're discussing it. I don't know.
It's a lowly creature in most people's eyes.
Yeah.
Yet it has such.
Okay, yes. That's a very good point. And the Gemara, we're going to read more in a second, but how it's made, how it's a very delicate creature, and it has this ability to split open.
It's humble. It has humility.
Has humility.
It has power.
That's right. So it's a very delicate creature, while simultaneously can split even the toughest surface.
Right.
It's that bittul. Let's see right now. Actually, that's a good segue. Okay, so we're we're in the middle. The line begins the word klum, and then the second word is a tafin arish, tan rabbanon, in the middle of the page. Well, lower than the middle. Yeah, I can show you. Yeah. Okay. Tan rabbanon, our sages taught. So we're reading now Mishnah text again. I mean, I'm sure there is elsewhere in the Gemara where it's discussed, and probably look up there and get a fuller picture. I'm looking on the side of the Gemara to see if there's any citations to Tosefta. Okay, Tanur Rabbanon, our sages taught. Shamir zeh, so we're looking at Tosefta, Mishnaic era text. Shamir zeh, this Shamir, Briyosai, its creation, Kisa'oda, is as small as like a kernel of barley. It's a small little creature. And it's been created since the beginning of creation. So it's not a miraculous phenomenon that appeared out of nowhere, but it existed since the beginning of creation. Again, further to my point that this might have been a phenomenon that was available the world over. And the ain't called dover kasher yachal b'fanav. No strong material can stand in its face. So it's a tiny little creature, that bittul, that self-surrender, seemingly harmless, and it's humility, and that humility cuts through even the toughest of materials. Now, the mem is shamanizing. Now get this. How do you care for it? Literally, how do you Mishamar means to guard it. How do you store it? How do you store it? Where do you keep it? right? You put a
Harvested.
you put a horse in the barn, and you put a cow in the field. And what do you do? Where do you put this shamir thing? Okay, so says the Gemara, this Mishnah text. Karchen oisai be sfugin shel tzemer. You put it into, you wrap it in like sfugin is like bundles, kind of wool. So it's like not wool that's been spindled, woven or spindled, but before, while it's still, what's it called? Tuft. It's like a scrunchie. It's like a mushy. It's the kind of thing you stuff your pillow with.
Fibers.
Yeah, so it hasn't been spun into thread yet. That's right. It's pre-spun wool, so it's cushion.
Cut right off the.
That's right. It's what you
animal.
cut right off the animal, but combed probably.
Okay, cool.
So it's what you would. It's that big like mush that you would put onto the spindle to spin out and make it thin. So it's the kind of thing you would stuff into a pillow.
Right.
Okay, so you wrap it in that, and it's very delicate. And you put it beitni shel avar. And you put it into like a bowl or a kind of utensil of lead. Right? You put it into metal or stone, it might crack through that because it cuts through that, which is tough.
Lead is metal, but it's soft.
It's a softer material. It's a softer material. Maybe not metal, but if you had like a hard material, it would crack open. So you need specifically a soft one.
It's pliable.
Right? That's right. So
it's not brittle.
It's not, exactly. So you have the it's nestled in this little wool ball, and then lead. Now this lead, Malaya Subi Sa'irin, is filled with barley bran, so unfinished barley. So you either treat it very delicately.
The outer coat of the barley.
Say again?
That would be the bran, the outer.
So no, so it's three layers. You have the lead filled with the barley bran, and then in that you would have the wool in which there's a shamir. So it's really to be treated very delicately.
Oh, it's like a
Doesn't
cushion.
agree with the Baraita though. The Baraita says you need to show the shamir what to break,
Right.
right? So
Oh. Here it seems to be saying be careful that it might break something.
yeah, on its own.
Or maybe that's the point. If you don't show any marker, it'll just start cracking things wantonly.
Wantonly, yeah. The
And then
bran
if you-
seems to be a buffer zone between the metal,
Not
the stone, and our metal.
Otherwise, it might break wantonly. Back to Robert's
Maybe
point,
it
that has to be
needs-
directional bit. Otherwise, just get scattered and everything breaks.
Kryptonite.
It has to be. Yeah, it's something like that. It's just kind of. It's a very interesting phenomenon. I'm sure there are some chemicals out there that have this kind of similar thing, where if you treat it delicately, it doesn't break anything. And then when you put it on a rough surface, it cracks. I'm sure this stuff exists.
Right, you
in the
put
world
some
of chemistry.
chemicals in like a wax-based container because it won't eat through that. But let's say metal, it'll corrode metal.
Right.
It depends on what it reacts
Right.
with.
Right. Yeah. Right. So maybe that's the point of the marker, to your point, that if it's not directional, then it just breaks everything.
Haphazardly,
That's right.
indiscriminately.
Yeah. Okay. Now, again, further to my point that this must have been an international phenomenon. It wasn't just unique to the Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara now lists a bunch of other things that stopped when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Just a couple of things, and none of them are necessarily related to the building of the Beis Hamikdash itself. They're just beautiful things that existed in the world that stopped. Okay, see if I can remember the translation of all this Aramaic. Amar Rabbi Ami said, Mishachar of Mikdash Rishon, when the first temple was destroyed, Batla Shira Pardana, some
Shiny silk.
some unique sort of silk. The Schuchis Lavana and white glass. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is because it's not around since the first temple. And Tanya Rabbi Hachi, this is Rabbi Ami speaking, and Rabbi Ami is a scholar from the age of the Gemara. So the Gemara backs him up. Tanya Rabbi Hachi, and we learned similarly with the Mishnah text, which states, same point, Mishachar of Mikdash Rishon, when the first temple was destroyed, Batla Shira Pardana, this unique silk ceased, the Schuchis Lavana, as well as this white glass. And added here is Rechev Barzel, iron chariots. I don't know what that means, or why iron chariots would have stopped then, but presumably there was some sort of chariot that existed then, or some sort of iron that was available and is no longer available. Rashi offers no comment.
Merkava was chariot, yeah.
So I'm sure there's symbolism to this idea
Yeah,
of the
it's
silk, of the white glass, of the chariot, and then the final one. V'yesh, others say, af yayin kadosh, also congealed wine, habab misnir, which comes from a place called Snir, and this congealed wine, hadaimaku gule dvela, is similar to fig cakes. This is a popular food item in the Mishnaic era and in the Gemara era because it's discussed quite a number of times, which is like figs that have been like
compressed.
dried and then compressed into like this cake. It's apparently a delicacy. I guess they somehow compacted all the sugar and the sweets, and they must have mixed it with oil and some other things, and it wasn't, and it was one of those few non-perishables.
It's probably candy.
Yeah, it seems like it was some sort of like dessert or candy, like probably a modern, ancient version of compote that we have today, so something of that nature.
But solid though.
Yeah, but it seems like it was non-perishable because you can dry it out and it's okay.
Isn't that how today they package figs?
They do compress them
they
together.
dry
them, they pack them, and they put them in a ring.
Yeah.
Sometimes you find them in a ring. Or
Oh, so something like that, yeah.
they
Yeah.
may just call that a cake.
Yeah, that was called the
Yeah,
Gulei
yeah,
Vela.
sure.
So
That's
apparently this congealed wine had that same property.
Similar.
So I guess it was kind of like imagine yeah, I mean it sounds actually really cool. Instead of drinking wine, you're like taking bites,
Jello
and it has the wine effect and it tastes sweet and it's delicious.
These Jello shots.
Something of that nature. Yeah. So putting aside any mystical underlying meanings to all this, which I'm sure there are, take it on the most literal level, these three things existed. It wasn't as if like they were exclusively available only to those in the temple. These are universal items that were available to the world and stopped when the temple was destroyed. And I'm assuming that the same thing could have been true of the Shamir. And if that's the case, I've solved the mystery of how the pyramids are built. I don't know, it's just a fun theory to play with. But I'm sure there's other sources in Midrash or wherever that discuss the Shamir. And if you really want to make a proper thesis around this, we'd have to look up all those sources. Okay, you have a wonderful day. And tomorrow, God willing, we get to more things that ended at the destruction of the temple, namely some unique honey that we don't have today. Have a good day, everybody.
Just warming up here.